We are recording this session, and when it comes to the point where we're doing breakout rooms, that part will not be recorded, just so you know. And then also how we've been trying to stage the design of these workshops is to later on leave time for more individualized questions. So if you do have any question that comes along that's more relevant, to you individually, and we can stay on afterwards and answer them, those types of questions. So let's get started. So this is the third part of a three-part series in which it's basically taking you through the process of redesigning a unit in your course. And so just to get started, we asked in the registration form a couple of questions to get a sense of who's going to be here today. And oh gosh, here we go with my going ahead too quickly. Sorry. Here we go. Okay. So in the question we asked is, which course would you like to focus on? How many students are typically in your course? Is this the first time you are teaching this course? And is there anything else we should know about? And so just so you know who else is on the call today, we have scheduled a couple of folks from accounting, some from economics, management, art, theater, English, and I'm originally from management and Pamela's from communications. So today, nobody from Marks, very suspicious. No, I'm just kidding. But we do have some good representation from different disciplines, even though it's a more intimate group. I do want to acknowledge that a lot of people are without power right now. So, well, I think everybody's going to manage and engage the best that they can. I don't know about you guys, but I was in meetings yesterday and all of a sudden there was a pop and there was no power for a bit, but luckily I'm on a generator right now. Okay, so just to introduce myself, I'm Allison Laird-Samuels. I'm the director of the Center for Teaching and Learning. I'm also a lecturer in the management department. My area is entrepreneurship. And what we've been doing each week is, as part of the introduction, just sharing some thought that we have that is relevant to this week's topic. And part of what we're about to embark upon is a peer review. And so this is, one of the main purposes of a peer review is to learn from a peer. And so in the spirit of that, I am sharing who I'm thinking about this week, Zoe Sheehan Saldana, who happens to be on today's session. We had the pleasure of co-teaching a couple years ago. And as Zoe says, she's blushing right now. And her area is in art. And we had co-developed a course around design thinking and 3D printing. And one of the things I really appreciated learning from teaching with her is that I had gotten very focused on, fancy PowerPoint slides, making things, because also entrepreneurship, there's sometimes some pressure to get very tech oriented. And Zoe, she made me really appreciate the power of just kind of slowing down and writing, like writing on a whiteboard, and that process of writing as we were talking about what, whether a task that it was that students were going to be doing in the class, or else, as part of the conversation and dialogue, just writing on the board, acknowledging the words of what somebody was saying. It kind of slowed the pace down, and it gave, I realized at times as a faculty member, I'm so rushed to cover certain content, to meet a certain learning goal, that it made me realize the importance of kind of slowing down and giving people a moment to think. And there is something powerful about having these moments where it's not just about the words, but the physical effect of writing something and seeing it just kind of hits people differently. So that's what I'm thinking about. And with me today is Pamela Thielman, who works with me at the CEDL.
And I am also, as Allison mentioned, in communication studies. And then I have a sideline in theater as well. That's what I'm completing my PhD in at the moment. So this week, the colleague I'm thinking about is Seth Graves. Seth teaches in the English department at Baruch and also works with us in the CTL. And in the context of his work in the English department, I happened to attend a workshop where he was sharing about contract grading, which is how he does his writing classes, because his classes are they're in that kind of first arc of learning how to write in college, 2100 and 2150. And he does this thing called contract grading, which is basically the way he explains it. He doesn't grade the content; he grades the process. So students can turn in an essay that might not be an A to some of us when we look at it from a grammar or construction perspective, but if they've done consistent, real, earnest work and built on a foundation, grown from where they started, they can get that higher grade. And when I first heard about it, I thought it was bonkers, right? Because I'm used to thinking of grades as being a little bit more objective. But the more I thought about the way he approached it, the more I considered the ways that I grade my assignments. And I started to look and see, okay, well, what does it look like my priority is when I grade assignments in the way that I do? And I have a speech class, so here at Baruch, and so I have these big rubrics with 4, 3, 2, 1, 0 for tons of individual little pieces. And I started looking at all those individual pieces and thought, well, I'm telling my students, all I care about is your final performance. And that's not accurate, right? Like I care about, did you draft it? Did you practice? Did you show that you did follow along with us in class as we did X, Y, and Z? So I started actually under his influence, or sort of taking his influence in mind, revising my rubric so that it included more of the process, so that when I introduced the assignment to students and I showed them the rubric, which I always do when I introduce the assignments, these big, high stakes assignments, they can see that I'm not just interested in, were you loud enough? Were you presentable? Did you, organize well and use all the vocabulary in your citations? I'm also interested in, did you have a draft outline? Did you participate in the class peer review? Did you practice? Did you come into class and do the practice session with everybody, right? So learning to think about how my grades could better reflect, or my grading process could better reflect my priorities for the course and the things that I felt were important, was something that I learned from Seth. So that's what I'm thinking about this week.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about us, and now we're going to do a little bit of checking in with you. So let's see if I get, now that this is my third week doing this, let's see if I can get this going. Okay, so I think I did it. So this, just so you know, is anonymous. And so I'm going to ask you to take a couple of moments to just read the questions and to answer them. The primary purpose of this is for basically us to get a sense of what, where you are with this process. And therefore that will also help us adjust as we move forward. Let's see what is happening, the big reveal. Okay, I am sharing the results. So let's see. So did you have a chance to write a rough draft? Most of you have, not everybody did. And you know what? Do you think like this mirrors what happens in our regular teaching? I would say yes, right? And so that's very helpful for us to know. So that way, when we go forward into the peer review part of it, that's totally fine. And we'll make adjustments accordingly. And like we were talking about earlier on, this is, a 3-part workshop series. And we know that some people will not be able to attend parts 1 or 2. And we're thrilled that people are joining here today for the third one, and we'll make this work. And then this is really great. We wanted to get a sense, like, you know, part of today we're doing a peer review process, and that can be a very vulnerable process. It can be exciting, it could be scary. So we wanted to kind of just quickly check in on how you're feeling about it. And I think it's important to show that there's a diversity of feelings and attitudes about this in as we move forward, and just to be mindful of that. And so hopefully the way that we are staging this will help make everybody feel more confident and comfortable going into this process. Okay, so let us move on.
We do want to just make sure everyone's on the same page. We're not going to belabor the points here, but four kind of big things we've talked about over the last two sessions are the asynchronous and synchronous teaching and learning. So synchronous is happening right now. Asynchronous is what you did if you thought about and prepared some work today, and you're hearing the traffic. It's the joys of Zoom. Then we have backward design. That is the approach that we're suggesting for revising your course, meaning just very simply starting with your learning goals, developing some assessments that will assess whether students have met those learning goals, and then from there building in your lesson plans to get students to that point. Scaffolding is a part of that, so building towards high stakes assignments with a range of low stakes assignments so that students can build skills and get feedback along the way. They're not just thrown into the deep end. And I think this is something we're all pretty familiar with, even if it's just something we've intuited. And then finally, last week, we talked about grading versus assessment, because we want to kind of make sure that we're using the same language around different pieces of course design. And when we're using grading, that's more of a final assessment, right? This is like high stakes assignments, essays, big projects, the end of semester grade. Whereas assessment is really a process for you to give some low stakes practice, ungraded or very low point kinds of assignments and activities that can tell you what students are learning and give you and them a chance to adjust your approach. So does anybody have questions about any of these four things before we move forward? Because I know we've talked about them, but we haven't had specific time to ask. If not, we'll move on, but we're happy to answer specific questions that might be in your mind at this point. All right, let's move on.
Yeah, and also should have mentioned before, but we will be sending out copies of these slides, and when it's available, the recording is as well, so you can have that as your reference later on. So the last, well, not the last, second to last thing we're going to review is just this terminology of unit. Again, it's very non-specific. We're using it because it's non-specific. However you've decided to organize your unit that makes sense for your course and your discipline, fine by us. It could be by learning goal, high stakes assignments, topics or themes, textbook chapters. You may have 3 units, you may have 12. It really is up to you. But it's just a kind of catch-all term that we're using to describe a chunk of your course. That's right. And I think we can kind of skate over this, just again, disambiguating. Assessment is to improve student learning, grading is evaluation. So I think we're A-okay on that. Yeah. Okay, so today, as opposed to some of the other workshops, we actually want to spend some more time actually digging in and doing some of the work. So we know that not everybody today has a draft today of a unit, and that's fine. But for right now, we're going to focus on getting set up for those of you who were able to bring a rough draft of a unit. So there's going to be some logistics that we need to have happen in order to get started to start sharing the work. So what we'd like you to do for those of you who, and we'll give about 5 minutes because I found over time, sometimes this can go more quickly, sometimes it takes a couple more moments. But for those of you who do have a rough draft of a unit, if you could find the file that you would like to share. And then to make sure that the file is in either a Word doc or PDF format, because that's going to be easier, you know, for other people to download and to take a look at. You're not doing this yet. This is kind of like a spoiler alert, but we are going to soon be putting you into some breakout rooms to, you know, review the draft of your unit. So once you are in your breakout room, we're going to ask you to drop your file into the group chat so that the other members in your group can download the file. So Pamela, I'm going to say you're kind of like just to get like very old and date myself, the Vanna White of like dropping. I'm going to go like this. You can drop the file into the group chat again and show folks how to do it. So what you can see is in the chat box, if you have it open, towards the right, there should be a little icon that looks like a piece of paper and it says file. And if you click on that, that should allow you to upload, identify a file and then drop it into the group chat. And again, in a couple moments, we'll give some more explicit directions, but wanted to give you a couple of moments to just try to find that file that you're going to be focusing on today.
So I have a test document. If you don't see the test document in the chat, you may have joined the chat after I dropped it. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that test document one more time. It's a Word document and it's just called test document. I will let you know when that has dropped. Okay. All right, so now you should be able to double click on that test. You should be able to open or download that test document from the chat. I can't do it because I've uploaded it in the first place. So now it's gonna open only from my computer. So you should be able to open that document. And if you've done it correctly, you will get a happy surprise. Allison, can you confirm that this is working?
Yes. Let me see. I have to admit I did not initially save it, but now I do. So once I save it, it says for me that I can download it to my download. And then let's see. Oh, yep. Just as Zoe said.
If you've been around the CTL, you know there's going to be a cat showing up somewhere. So here's our Easter egg cat here. You got this.
I'm going to test that. Okay, so so I guess right now, if anybody else is having a little bit of challenge with this for technical reason, whatever, please indicate that in the chat. And then once we do the breakout rooms, like we'll help sort and figure out to get everybody on the same page. However, what we'll do right now is we'll just move on to the next part of the exercise. So, you know, we've had you upload or get ready to share your unit. Let's get you thinking a little bit more about what has gone into the development of your unit. Pamela, do you?
So we just want to, again, we're reviewing stuff just to get your heads all in the same place for this peer review. We've talked a fair amount about scaffolding in the past. You're probably already familiar with it, but just some questions to remember to ask yourself, and there will be some of this in assignment guidelines themselves to reflect on, and it's also in the redesign one unit worksheet and resource documents. But when you're thinking about scaffolding, you should be able to answer these kinds of questions. So what are the learning goals? What are you going to provide for students? That's the content, the lecture slides, readings, videos. What are the lower stakes assignments? So what are those things that are allowing students to practice? Have you included moments of learning as a classroom community? So that can be as simple as group discussion in class. It can be as formal as a guided peer review process like we're trying today. It could be formal or informal final review sessions. Just, are there moments where students are learning with each other? And then what are your priorities when it comes to grading? So are you assessing or grading at various points? Are you using rubrics? Are you marking grammar errors? Are you just marking complete or incomplete? So figuring out the answers to these questions will help make sure that your unit is robustly scaffolded.
Okay, so now I'd like to start segueing into the peer review itself. And so what I'd like you to do is to take a couple of moments to, let's say like, my mouse is very reactive. It's very enthusiastic to move. So take like 5 minutes to just do some personal reflective writing with the idea of where you are with this draft that you brought here today. I'm also just acknowledging that people have very different definitions of what a polished versus a rough draft are, right? So for you to decide, what is the unit in your course that you brought today? Why are you choosing to focus on it? It could be that there's a strategic reason. It could be, well, this is what I already have for today and this is what's going to be. So whatever the reason is, that's fine. What about your draft feels pretty polished? What feels rough? Do you feel like there's any holes? Like I didn't get to X, Y, Z, or I feel like it's done. And then also, how do you feel about the work you've done so far? Are there any like concerns that you have? And then to start thinking about, and we'll dig into this in a couple moments more, like what would you like to get out of this peer review process? Are there specific questions that you have about your work thus far? So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to just reflect on this. And if you'd like to turn off your webcam, that's more comfortable for you to do some writing, that's fine, whatever's most comfortable. So we will revisit in 5 minutes. Okay, so I am going to move on to the next moment of reflection, which is digging a bit deeper into this last question that we've just had in this initial reflective moment where trying to think a little as strategically as possible about what you would like from this peer review process, what specific questions you have about this unit. So the following are some questions that you can follow. If you already have something a lot more precise and clear in mind, that's fine to focus on that. However, these are some things to kind of get you thinking about different ways you might receive feedback. Also, given, keep in the back of your mind how much time we have, that it's not like that you have overnight to review somebody's work. It's really within a shorter period of time. So the question is like, what kind of feedback would be most helpful for today? So something you can focus on or more kind of big picture questions, like how do your assignments, exams, or projects help to determine if students have met the learning goals? So like, is there a logic behind what you've developed from from your peers' perspective? Does the workload and pace of the work feel balanced for you and or your students? I know there have been times when I've gotten very enthusiastic about introducing a new assignment for my class, but once I start mapping it out, it seems like it's going to be an unrealistic amount of work to ask my students to do within the time period, or it's going to take too much prep work on my part in terms of developing the assignments, getting everybody on board and focused, that I realized I need to kind of pare things back a bit. The other thing, does the assignment or its components feel relevant to the students? And is there, or might there be an opportunity to engage a more meaningful moment? in what you've developed so far. The other type of feedback you might be looking for is a little bit more detailed. Like, for example, are the logistics sufficiently detailed and clear? For example, um, like, are deadlines clearly articulated? If you are using, like, for example, right now we're having you experiment with uploading a file into the chat feature. Are the directions sufficient enough, or would we need to build something out more? um, are there relevant tutorials that you have in the assignment? Other details you might want to look at: how robustly is the assignment scaffolded? Are there enough low stakes assignments, or should something more be added? Is again there a place for communal learning? And is there a way for students to engage asynchronously if needed? So the purpose, I just want to take a moment digging into this last point a little bit more. As you know, given, like, even in this moment right now, there are some people who are registered for today's session who lost power and they're not able to join synchronously here today. So how would we be able to get them caught up in, with the content, with the assignment? And so the reality is we're going to probably have to develop these kind of plan Bs, in our teaching for the fall. So if somebody's Wi-Fi cuts out, that they still have a way to actively engage in the course. So this is another area that you can ask for feedback on. If you feel like solid on your synchronous activities, maybe you need some help in brainstorming an asynchronous plan B for some students. So what I'd like you to do is to take a couple of moments to think about and reflect on, which of these questions you think might be the most helpful for you to have your peer feedback focus on during the peer feedback session. So I'm going to give you, like, say 3 minutes, so say about 1:40 to, to think about this. Okay, so transitioning. So this is the part where, again, you've been thinking about, you have a draft that you brought here today that you will be receiving feedback on. Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit to just introduce you something to that some ways to think about when it's your turn, when you are offering the peer review. Many of us have different experiences with offering feedback to our colleagues, and this worksheet is designed to kind of give you some prompts to start the conversation. And in particular, I've used peer review in my teaching, and I found that a number of times students benefit when you provide some sort of clear set of how, like, what are the rules for engaging in a conversation, because both receiving and offering feedback can feel very vulnerable. It can be scary. And this is a way to start, I guess, like, encouraging some more specific constructive feedback without it feeling like it can quickly veer into offending somebody or being mean. But how to keep the conversation constructive, and hopefully precise. So this is a worksheet that we're offering, is something that you might use when you shortly go into your breakout rooms for your peer review session. So I think it's always good to kind of create a foundation of what it is you're doing. So it's the unit that you're reviewing. It might be the PowerPoint slide deck. It might be an assignment. So name it. And then to say, like, well, this is actually what I'm focusing on the feedback, when I'm giving the feedback. You can't cover all the questions. We don't have enough time for that. But instead, to really give yourself permission to focus in on a couple of key areas that you feel like will be mutually, not only would be helpful to the person who's receiving the peer review, but also you feel like you contribute in that area. So some ideas are to ask, something that is working well is, And I see there's some notes about where we're having a little bit technical grafus. We'll figure that out, and we'll make sure that you guys have this worksheet um, by the time, shortly when you get into the breakout rooms. So to be thinking about something that is working well is something that I think is unclear. A question that I have is an opportunity that I see is, and then to explain why. A resource you should look at, and you might find it helpful because, and this part of your unit feels very complete or incomplete. So again, this is a way to kind of start a conversation and focus some of the feedback in a time sensitive manner. So let's move on into talking about what are the instructions for the activity. There's a lot of information in this slide. So in a couple of moments, I'm going to put you into a breakout room. In most cases, there will be pairs of people. Ideally, you would get, this could be done with probably, I'd say groups of 3 or 4, so you can receive more feedback, but we're a more intimate group today. So because we wanted to make sure everybody had a turn, we're putting you primarily in pairs. So once you've been put into your breakout room, if you can drop the file that you're going to want to have the peer review on into the break room group chat, just like we modeled earlier on. Then as quickly as you guys can, open the file in the group chat, the files in the group chat, so everybody can see the appropriate content. You're going to then choose who's going to go first. It's really not a big deal, so it could be a quick decision. And the first person has 2 minutes to share what their thinking is about their unit. So we suggest referring back to that reflection where it's like, what did you bring today? What you feel is rough? What isn't? What are the questions that you think would be helpful on? So again, like for example, if you know that one area is really not fleshed out, it doesn't make sense for somebody to provide a lot of feedback on that area if you kind of already have an idea of what you plan to do, but you just haven't gotten around to it. Or it might be that it's not fleshed out because you're kind of stuck and you would like some help in that area. So the person who's presenting first should take 2 minutes to kind of share where they're at in their process, and then what kind of feedback would be helpful for them. Then you'll take turns, and the second person will share the similar information. After that, it's time to start the actual peer review process. So we're going to give you 15 minutes to review the person's work, and then to focus on that my feedback worksheet. Tip again is to not try to cover everything, but to focus on a couple of different areas. After you've had the 15 minutes to review and to start drafting some of the feedback, then you'll want to spend a couple moments sharing what your thoughts were with each other. Okay. So again, with the goal of this activity, it's for you to participate in a peer review process over Zoom, and then hopefully to get a little bit of feedback on what are some further possibilities for your unit, and to help focus your energy on any other further possible revisions that you might need. Here we go, into the breakout rooms we go. Now, welcome back. Okay, so we went through our activity, and now just take really a minute. Now, how did it go? What are some key takeaways? Just a moment to kind of regroup now that you've received feedback. Is there anything that you feel like you need to revise, and anything that you feel is ready? So take a minute to just jot down your thoughts in this area, please. So just bringing it back, I had the pleasure of learning some of Susan's plans for her semester ahead, and one of the things that we wound up talking about towards the end of our conversation was this idea of you have a lot of ideas, but not adding too much too quickly, and kind of paring things down. And I think this is one of the themes that came up last week is, um, well, I think in general, this is one of those moments that can feel very, very intimidating as a faculty member because there's so many options, but it also can be very liberating and exciting where it's like, I can do this or I could do that because now, you're starting from ground up. So what I would suggest is personally is to maybe focus on a couple of key areas initially, and not try to accomplish everything at once, with the idea and the assumption that it's very likely that many of the courses will be continue to be taught in the spring, either in fully online or a hybrid format. So this isn't the one moment in time where you have to accomplish it all, but rather this is an iterative process. And just want to segue in the interest of time. One of the things that we've been trying to do as much as possible is share with you how we designed today's workshop, again, with the idea that if you want to replicate any of these types of activities, you have some sort of model for you to, to look at and refer to. Pamela, do you mind talking a little bit about this?
Sure. So some of this will look familiar if you've been here for one or two of these, but always starting off with an icebreaker. It's a nice way to just ease us into a session. So introducing ourselves, and having that food for thought moment. So even if you don't need to by, week 10, say your name, even just taking a moment to say good morning and here's something I'm thinking about can be useful. So this week we went with the theme of peer review. So learning from peers was the impetus for our food for thought. We did want to continue to model using polls because they are fun, as Kamal mentioned. It's something that we can all do in whatever video platform. They all have some version of this that can help you interact with folks, but also do things like take attendance, get a feel for who's there and where they are in terms of having prepared as you've asked them and that sort of thing. We revisited some concepts from last time just to bring everyone up to date. Again, people are coming from different times, places. This is also just a time when I think a lot of us are feeling a little bit scattered. So it doesn't hurt to take that moment to reorient every time, even if it feels like, should I really do this again? The answer is probably yes. And then we wanted to model setting up and executing a peer review process, because this can be something that you can use in a variety of contexts, but that may be sort of daunting when you think about, well, I'm used to just coming in to my class, saying we're going to do a peer review, putting people in groups and having people hand papers around. So the steps we kind of built in for this were you did your asynchronous pre-work. We brought up those concepts we wanted to have top of mind, like scaffolding. We shared a little bit about our logistics before going into it. And then we asked you to do a little bit of reflection and preparing yourself, planning for yourself going into this process. We went over the guidelines, what we were going to do and how we were going to do it in a little bit more of a granular way. Then we sent you into your breakout rooms with some structured feedback options. So that's that worksheet, which I hope everyone got, and which I will, again, get that inserted into the whole workshop resources document and have it sent to you when we send the follow-up email. But having that structure is very important when you can't go around from group to group and visually see what's happening like you can in a classroom. So having some kind of worksheet or something that comes out of, even if it's just a report back on this specific issue when you come back into the main room, having that little bit of accountability helps students stay on task in breakout rooms when you can't visually observe all of them all the time. And then finally, we had a little opportunity for some group discussion. So that was kind of the whole process that we envisioned, kind of like, this is how you might go about setting up a peer review for yourself. And then, of course, segueing into this pull back the curtain, which I hope you'll see more of this, and I know you'll see more of this as the CTL continues its programming into the fall semester. We're really trying to be as transparent as possible, because we've learned so much from doing all of this transitioning of our own work to online. So we're hoping that doing this, pulling back the curtain on a lot of things, from how we created workshops to why we chose certain tools. Um, you're going to see a lot more of that in the next month or two. So keep an eye out for that. We have found the discussions around pulling back the curtain useful, and we hope you find that useful as well. And then finally, we have this opportunity for questions and wrap up.
Yeah, so I think just to, before segueing to the questions and just want to remind you how to reach out to us if you have any questions moving forward. And after, like in the over next couple of days, we will send out the worksheets, a copy of these PowerPoint slides. And as we get all the recordings for the 3 workshops together, we will make them available to folks. And at this point, we'd like to thank everybody, and we will stop the recording so that we can turn it over to any questions that you might have.